Oh, goodness. Hello, world. What's up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Fortier, and we are here live at the Build studio in New York City. Our next guest is the CEO of Kairos, an organization founded 10 years ago on the belief that entrepreneurs have the ability to solve the world's biggest problems. One of said problems, thanks to student loan debt, housing costs, healthcare costs, childcare costs, man, millennials are broke. It's true. I'm a millennial. Can confirm. Kairos is committed to building solutions to the numerous financial barriers we face today. Here to talk to us all about it, CEO of Kairos, the great Ankur Jain is in the building. Make some noise, everybody. Come on, do it up.
So it's so funny and embarrassing, but I didn't know much about Build series up until a few months ago.
Fair enough.
And I am one of these guys who goes to Rumble across the street. For the longest time, I thought Build series was a rock climbing studio because of the I remember I ran into some of the guys at Verizon Media and they were like, you should go into Build series. And I was like, what's Build? And they were like, well, it's right across the street from Rumble on 4th and, Broadway. It's like, oh, you mean right by the rock climbing place?
Yeah. People don't know this. We turn these columns around, and there's footholds on the back of these.
I mean,
Tomas and I every night, we
club.
scale them. Yeah. Just to stay fresh, really. It's not a business, but it's something we do here.
I could tell that you got your attire ready.
Thank you. Yeah, these are snapaways, these jeans, actually. I rip these right off when we scale those walls. Ankur, welcome to the show. It is so exciting to have you here, man. I've been reading up a lot on what you've been doing, a lot of the work you've had going on. You just published an awesome op-ed in Marie Claire. A lot to say right now.
It's funny. You said you're how old are you now?
I am 33. I literally had to think about it. That's I knew 30-something. I didn't know where it landed, but 33.
So it's funny. My little brother is graduating next week. And I realized this is actually what prompted the op-ed. He is the last millennial to graduate college.
Is he really?
So
his generation that's it.
That's it. It's so crazy. I mean, I know this sounds cliche, but for the word millennial has always been associated with just like kids, young people, right? All of a sudden, we're adults. There's no more young millennials.
Shit was fast.
If that didn't make you feel, there's now, by the way, there's Gen Z, there's Gen Alpha already out there. Most people don't. I didn't know this.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. So everybody under the age of 8 is Generation Alpha. But the reason I bring this up is...
That's such a cooler name.
I think millennials are kind of cool.
Hell, they're 8. They can't appreciate it yet.
Listen, you'll see.
It's not that that's your fault. I don't blame you. But go.
All
right,
but look, we got our own name, right?
Yeah.
There's only X, Y, Z. So what I think is interesting, though, is as he graduated, I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of look back, and now that everyone's been in the workforce for the most part for 10, 12 years, kind of how are we faring as a generation financially, right? I mean, we've grown up. On one hand, we graduated for the most part. I mean, even your class at the worst recession of all time. I mean, since years, right? But on the other hand, we've had 10 years of economic growth, right? And today we have a low unemployment, and you would think that over that time, our generation would have started to prosper economically. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Nope. And what I don't think people realize is that, I mean, if you look today, 40% of our generation have zero savings. Think about that.
That's insane, man.
Right? 70% today have less than $1,000. Right? So the problem now is when you think about as we grow and continue to kind of go through each phase of life, I mean, we're still in a time where we haven't had to deal with an economic downturn, right? I mean, what happens when things start to change and you start to see layoffs, right? Or what happens if you have a healthcare emergency and we can't cover it? I mean, we have not set ourselves up to be successful. And that's going to be a huge problem, especially as people now enter their 30s and people are trying to have families and buy homes. And the system isn't working.
Right. No,
right? And the challenge is, what do we do about it? Yeah. Right? And this has been the most, I think, frustrating thing because we're now in an election season. I mean, everybody here is following 2020 elections, I assume. And it's, on one hand, it's kind of inspiring to see candidates up there talking about these problems for the first time. Right? We're not just talking about foreign policy is incredibly important, but it's also important that internally, domestically, we're taking care of our population. And at the same time, I mean, how many elections have we gone through where things didn't go our way, right? Or where someone makes a big promise like they're going to just pay off everyone's student loans, and then they become president and nothing happens, right? And the challenge is we just can't take that risk anymore. So about 2 years ago, I got a group together and we said we've got to find a way to rebuild these sectors Because if we can't fix housing costs from the bare bones foundation, if we can't fix healthcare costs, if we can't fix the student loan issue, this thing is just going to compound, right? I mean, by 2021, just to put this in perspective, we will have $2 trillion of outstanding student debt. Right, $2 trillion.
And that's just you and me together.
Right.
That's not even.
I mean, it took me a long time to graduate.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, it's really though it's unacceptable. Yeah. And like, look, one of the things I do take pride in is our generation. We're not an outraged generation, right? There's a lot of that happening right now where it's anger about everything. I think we're a pretty practical, reasonable generation. If anything, we laugh it off. I mean, meme culture today is probably our best way of expressing this stuff, right? But if you actually look at memes, it's a little bit sad when you realize that half of the memes on like "fuck Jerry" are about not being able to afford your next meal, right? And
so let me ask you this, right? Where do you, when the problem you have to solve is there's not enough money to go around, how do you solve that problem? What do you look at? How do you figure that out?
Here's the reality. I think one of the greatest disservices to kind of the economy is that Silicon Valley, I spent years there, right? It's just gotten so out of touch with the realities of what people are dealing with that you have billions of dollars being invested into technology companies, right? And billions of dollars being invested in things like crypto kitties or like some new currency on some blockchain, AI, whatever. Like nobody needs, I promise you, in the rest of the country, another app that you pay $10 for to get a $6 burrito delivered to your apartment.
Yes.
Okay? That is just not what we need. But if you start to put some of that creativity into fixing things, you can start to rebuild these sectors to work for our generation. Right?
Why do you think it is that they are so focused on solving problems we don't actually have?
Because ironically, these are the biggest markets in the world, but they're so foreign to a world that's only thought software and fun and gimmicks and all this stuff, right? But at the same time, there are really simple ways that we can fix this problem, and that's kind of why I'm here today, right? So I'll give you an example. Remember, 40% of millennials have zero savings, okay? How many of you guys rent? Do you rent? Okay, do you guys all rent? In order to rent an apartment today, it's first month rent, last month rent, security deposit, your fucking firstborn child. Like, it's like, I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, you can't, like, just to be able to rent, you have to have so much savings. And what's happened now, by the way, as a result of that, almost 30% of people between the ages of 25 and 30 have had to move back in with their parent or grandparent. Think about that. In our generation, 1 in 3 almost people have now moved back in with a family member. That's outrageous, right? And so we looked at this problem and said, okay, how do we fix it? Right? And if you think about it, like the security deposit, which is thousands of dollars, which is more than people have savings, doesn't actually do anything. It just sits there, sits in an escrow account. And by the way, by law, your landlord can't touch it unless they're skeezy, which maybe they do. You can't use it. And by the way, you may not even get it back, right? So we looked at that and said, this just makes no sense. And the first thing we did 2 years ago is we started an insurance company called Rhino, right? And it's so simple. And this is why I get frustrated that the Valley is not putting more time on these problems, because such a simple fix. We said security deposits are basically insurance. What if you could just pay $5 a month, just like you do for renter's insurance, right? We'll insure the landlord for you, and you get to keep your money. That's simple. So we launched it. And in the first 6 months, we gave $10 million of savings back to renters in New York, right? Like, think about that. You take that a step further, there is $45 billion of cash sitting in escrow accounts from residential security deposits. 50% of renters are under the age of 30. Just put that in perspective. 22 and a half, or 20, what is it, $20 billion can be given back to our generation just by getting rid of security deposits, right? And it doesn't affect the landlord, it doesn't affect the renter, but everybody wins, right? And so if we just put more brain power around the world on problems like this, we can solve it, right?
Rhino is one of, I want to say, 5 companies that you're incubating over at Kairos, is that right?
Yeah.
And you've invested in a bunch of others.
Right. So like what we're doing, and look, we're just one player here. My purpose of coming here today is that we need to get more people in the ecosystem building these products. And as good as it is to have the political candidates talking about this again, I just don't think we can rely on them to fix the problem in time. Right? And even if you can get, let's say, government health care, it doesn't solve the problem that the healthcare costs keep rising. Right? So you may not be paying for it directly, But if costs keep rising, even if the government's paying for it, inevitably, it'll come out of somebody's pocket, right? Did you see, by the way, the announcement that Robert Smith, was it 2 days ago?
Yeah.
Did you guys see this? At his commencement speech, he agreed to pay off the entire class student loans.
Cool.
Incredible,
Very
right?
amazing moment. However,
But if you put that into perspective, he gave, I think it was $45 million,
over
$40 million to paying off student loans. Okay, it's one of the largest, it was the largest gift to that university, one of the largest private gifts to any university, and it covered 400 students. Right? Like, that is not a sustainable model, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but these things they seem so obvious when we talk about it, and yet, I mean, look, as powerful as a meme is, like, that's not solving it, right? And so,
well, what dictates? Here's what I wanted to know, because Rhino, that's a very obvious. I'm going to invest. We're going to do this. Rhino makes sense. What is your decision-making process? What made those 5 companies come to be? Why are those the 5 that you're incubating? Why did you invest in the other ones? What do you look for?
So, I mean, it's really fairly simple, right? I think that's the key to all of this, is just start with the simplest, most obvious thing, which is when you look at our income after tax, where is it going, right? And I'm sure you love, like, well, first of all, I'll answer this. Where it's going is very simple. More than 85% of all income is going to just housing, food, transportation, healthcare, and if you're at that stage, childcare, okay? And the rest of that income for our generation is primarily going to debt, and most of that is student loans, okay? That's where you start, right? So no, an extra delivery app doesn't solve that problem. No, CryptoKitties doesn't solve that problem, okay? But fixing the rent problem does. Fixing childcare does, right? So a lot of our generation is now entering their 30s, and that's a time where people are looking to start a family, have kids, et cetera. What's outrageous is that if you want to start a family, and in our generation, typically 70% of like new families have both parents going to work. It's not this like old school traditional, like husband goes to work and wife stays at home. Like that is not how it works anymore, right? The problem is that the second parent going back to work post-tax, almost the entire income is going to just cover childcare. Right? Like it's just a lose-lose situation. But again, it can be fixed, right? And so what we realize is that, for example, in every neighborhood, in every area, there are some families where you might rather stay at home and take care of your kid than go work all week, give all your income right back to a child care and not spending time with your child, right? So we helped, actually, this was an investment we made. We helped invest in a group of entrepreneurs who said, what if we could help that family turn their home into a licensed franchise child care center, right? So now anybody could say, hey, I'd rather stay at home with my child, but I still want to make income. I'm happy to take care of 4, 5, 6 other kids. They get trained on how to do a proper childcare curriculum. We license them, we screen them. It's like a business in a box, right? And all of a sudden, they now have a new neighborhood childcare provider that's trusted that the other families can now drop their kid off to, right? I mean, it's pretty simple, like simple marketplace dynamics. This company, My Village, we've now opened 100 childcare centers in just a year across Colorado, Montana, Texas, right? And we're going to scale this thing across the country. But all of a sudden, you start to increase the supply of trusted, affordable childcare, right? And it's not that complicating, right? It just requires focus.
A lot of those are 2 great examples of how you sort of approach things from a different perspective. You're finding new solutions to old, long-standing problems. As you're coming up with these solutions, putting them in place, have you had to navigate any resistance from the old guard, or what kind of barriers have you encountered as you've tried to, for lack of a better term, disrupt these different areas?
So it's funny. I was yesterday. I was on your sister network, Yahoo News, and I think Yahoo tends to skew a little older in their viewership. And I say that not because I expected that, but because when you read the comments on that interview, it's just something that we've all everybody here has dealt with it, right? It was a bunch of people saying, hey, no one forced you to go to college. Why are you bitching about student debt? Hey, like, why don't you just work hard and save money? It's like, what money? Right? It's like it's just this constant, like the other day I did a CNBC interview where the anchor started yelling at me because he goes, the problem is that all you young people just waste your money on your $10 lattes and avocado toast. And I said, stop.
I gotta hear that one more.
But also, it's like, if flip the question, if the only luxury that we can afford is a $10 latte and avocado toast because we can't buy that fancy car that you had when you were 25, right? That's a problem, right? And it's just like, no, the avocado toast is not what's stopping us from being able to afford a down payment on a home. It's the fact that home prices have grown so much, right? And so like one of the things we're looking at now is like we rent for on average 7 years. If you live in a coastal city, you're renting for even longer, right? You're lighting that money on fire every month, right? And here's the reality. Today, the way that the laws work, and we've been working with Congress on this to try to change this too, because it just makes no sense. You're allowed to get a gift from a family member to pay for your down payment, okay? Nobody else can help you with your down payment. No businesses, nothing. That's just not, it's not allowed today. Okay? So all that really means is if you're lucky enough to be born into a really wealthy family, you get to buy a home. That home grows in value, and you get ahead. And if you're not, you're stuck. Yeah. Right? It doesn't make sense. So what we've been working on is how do we actually turn your rent dollars that you're spending every month without having to pay extra, without having to be locked into some small little ecosystem? Can we build a business model where that rent dollar actually goes towards your future home? Right? So imagine that every single person in this country, just by renting, by the age of 28, 29, 30, has actually saved enough money to be able to afford the down payment on a home, almost like an FSA for a healthcare account, right? Think about that. It changes the entire dynamics, and it's not that hard to do.
I was going to ask, did you do it?
We're working on it. We're working on it.
We're working on it right now. That's one of the questions you're trying to answer right now.
Yeah, and I think we can solve this. We can fix this. Like, we are committed to building solutions. We're committed to investing in people who are also working on it because, look, you got to have as many shots on goal as possible, right? And here's what I'll say. I think a lot of people look at this stuff and they say, oh, this is all like social issue stuff, right? And like to those guys in the Valley who think that, I will say this. I don't know if their Alexa-enabled gadgets are going to be a $5 billion market, a $1 billion market, or a $10 billion market. But student loans is $1.5 trillion, right? Housing is over $1 trillion. So fixing these issues for a generation that, by the way, is now the largest consumer base in the economy is probably a much better place to put their capital than wasting on all this other stuff.
It's pretty amazing, man. We're going to go to audience Q. Did I hear applause? I thought I heard applause. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Damn. I'll never step on an applause break. I'll tell you that. I'll stop this whole show. We're going to go in just a second to audience Q&A, but I wanted to ask you something. I'm really kind of interested in here. Your dad came through not too long ago. Naveen Jain was on here, and he and I were talking. He's got his literal moonshot. He's trying to get us to the moon. He's doing all these things. He's all these amazing. He's trying to impact billions and billions of people and thinking at such a global scale. And I'm wondering if your approach, if you going down to like the individual level, is that at all a subconscious or deliberate response, or are you working in tandem with your dad so you can cover all the bases? But I was fascinated by that you guys are similar things, different sides of the spectrum.
So he's at a stage in his life where he's trying to send rockets to the moon.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help people pay rent. So, but we will get there at some point, maybe. But step 1, step 2, step 3. And I think, look, at the end of the day, there are real problems that we can solve today. And entrepreneurship, historically, has always been about solving problems. Right? Today, it's just because it's the cool thing to do, and everyone's an investor and an entrepreneur, and really just they're unemployed, right? But like, there is an opportunity for us to solve real problems through the private sector and work with governments, right? And I think that's where we're focused.
Last thing, because I thought this was cool as hell, man. How old were you when you came up with your first business?
I mean, fake first business. I guess I was 12.
Yeah. Is that the one with the texting and the instant messaging? And
So,
tell people about it. It was badass. It's a good story.
So if you guys remember, so we got our first cell phones, at least for me, in like 7th grade, middle school, right? Those Nokia phones, did you guys have those?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so texting your friends on a Nokia phone was the worst experience. It was like 222255556.
Press it over and
Shoot,
over.
you messed up. Start over, right? And you could send to one person at a time, and it was 140 characters or 160 characters or whatever maximum per message. It was just miserable. So like, I got frustrated with it and somehow learned some basic coding and built the first computer to mobile messaging system. So if you guys have used iMessage on your computer today, where you could sync from your phone to your laptop, so I launched that in 2001. where you could just go online and text your friends, and they could text you back, and you had a whole messaging system. It was great.
Is there any truth to the servers melted down?
It's very true. So it's a good learning lesson, right? I'd rather learn it at 13 or 14 than I did now. But like my first true startup failure, of which I've had plenty, was back in the day. There was no like cloud services, right? There's no Amazon Web Services or any of these things, right? So my servers, my hosting was a computer in my bedroom. And that's where all the traffic was. And somehow we had like hundreds of thousands of people using this thing. And it was like, it was kind of crazy. And one day I went to school, forgot to turn the AC on. And it was a really, really nice hot spring day. And I came back, and you remember that blue screen of death? I had never learned the importance of backing up your data at the time. Oh. So 2 years of work just vanished overnight. And that was my first startup failure.
Wow. You were 12, 13 years old?
I think I was 14 when it all.
You got it out of the way. Yeah. There you go.
It's good. It's good. Start over, refresh, and move on.
I'll tell you right now, the stuff I lit on fire when I was 13 sure as hell wasn't for part of a startup, all right? You were light years ahead, so congratulations, sir. All right, Kate, how many I got in the room? I got at least one. I got one question. Fantastic. Microphone, boom, go for it.
Hi, I was wondering what advice you'd give to someone who has an app idea or wants to get a startup going, but they don't really know where to start.
Turn on the air conditioning. That's the first thing I just learned.
That's right.
That is
back
clutch.
up all your data. Honestly, I think the first thing is really important is make sure it's actually an idea that people care about. And I know that sounds so obvious, but I can't tell you how many people in the tech world and in Silicon Valley have this like, well, what if we could just do X, Y, and Z versus like people need X, Y, and Z, right? And the first thing I would do is get a little bit of validation on it. So I would just pop up a landing page. It'll cost you $20 to register a domain, put it up, and just make sure when you run some ads that people actually click on it and actually show interest, right? And it sounds silly, but like even just that data set of showing consumer interest makes it 10 times easier to then go to anybody to invest in. Because now you're not pitching just a pure concept, there's a little bit of validation to it, right? And it's cost nothing, right? So if I were you, I would start with that. I would just put up a landing page, describe what it is, have them input their information to sign up, and then be like, sorry, we're on a wait list, right? And like, you start to validate that people actually care about it, right? And then you can take that, you can use it to raise some initial capital because now you have some proof that people want it, right? And I'll give you an example. One of my close friends, actually, have you guys heard of Gravity Blanket? Yeah. It's like weighted blanket. Yeah. So he launched it like this. He actually just had a graphic that he designed. He had never manufactured anything. He had no factory, nada. And they put up a picture of this weighted blanket and called it Gravity Blanket and started running a couple ads on Facebook. And you could go in and you would literally fill it out all the way to checkout. You fill out your credit card information, and then it would say, sorry, we have a backlog, like we can't process your order at this time. We'll let you know when we're available, right? And the reason he did that is he wanted to see if people actually, A, were interested in the product, and were they interested enough to actually put in their credit card information, right? That simple little thing validated it. They then went and actually found a manufacturer, designed the product, launched the product. Today it does tens of millions of dollars in revenue.
Wow.
Right? So like there are ways to do this without having to sell your soul to some, VC out in the valley.
That's really good, great advice. Incredibly valuable advice. That's usually it's like, how do I make it as an actor? Well, try hard and don't give up, kiddo. But like that's actually tangible, like actionable stuff, man. That was pretty good. Thank you for that. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Kate, I got to wrap it up. Okay, fair enough.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you
The rock
so
climbing
much for
studio was
being here.
amazing.
Yeah,
Really
I'm glad
cool.
you enjoyed the studio. Yeah, they're already turning the columns around now, so get your shoes on. We can belay together. I wrote down the website for people to check out. It's KairosHQ.com, KAIROSHQ.com. Is there a better place you want them to hit up, or is that a good spot to start?
That's great.
That's a great spot right there.
And if you guys have great ideas to fix student loans or housing or childcare or healthcare, we want as many smart people working on this as possible, and we have the capital if people have ideas. So let's figure it out.
Hey, guys, do me a favor. Make a ridiculous amount of noise. Join me in thanking the great Ankur Jain right here, man.